Chapter 4, Section 4 in geometry is congruent triangles. So what this comes down to is this statement right here. Two polygons are congruent if and only if their corresponding angles and sides are congruent. So when I look here, I have triangle A, B, C. And I made triangle DEF by copying triangle ABC. So therefore, they are congruent. All I did was slide this down. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. Now, look at the position here for A. The corresponding position here is D. So I need to label D first. B pairs up with E, so E goes next. And then C, so F is next. So the order matters when I'm labeling. All right, they have to correspond. A pairs up with D, B pairs up with E, and C pairs up with F. So since these are congruent, I can say that angle A is congruent to angle, the corresponding one is D. Angle B is congruent to its corresponding part, E. Angle C is congruent to its corresponding part, F. I knew they were congruent, so therefore their corresponding parts should be congruent as well. So here and here, here and here, and here. This also applies to their side lengths. So, segment AB. AB. So therefore it is congruent to DE. Notice I'm following right along with the label here. Segment BC is congruent BC to EF. B, C, E, F. CA is congruent to F, D. Okay? So the corresponding parts are congruent. Okay? If the triangles are congruent. So AB, DE congruent, BC congruent to EF, AC congruent to DF. It doesn't just work for for triangles. It also works for regular polygons as well. So I have the shape polygon A, B, C, D. I did the same thing. I copied and pasted, therefore they are congruent. So it is congruent to, now, A pairs up with which one? F. B pairs up with E. C pairs up with H. And D pairs up with G. So since they are congruent, I can say that their corresponding parts are congruent. So AD should be congruent to FG. DC should be congruent to GH. BC should be congruent to EH. And therefore AB should be congruent to FE. Okay? And I could write all these down, but I'm just going to use the tick marks. So now, if I said that these two shapes are congruent, and I did this for angle F, I should be able to put the congruency on angle A, because their angle should also be congruent. If C is here, then that means C pairs up with H, so therefore H should be congruent. E pairs up with B, so B and E are congruent, and then G pairs up with D, so therefore they are congruent. Okay, and that's all chapter 4 is. If I say that the two shapes are congruent, then their corresponding sides and angles are congruent. So for example, okay, now I'm going to label this E, F, H, G. And I say that triangle E, F, H is congruent to triangle G, F, H. That means I can label, okay, things here. Angle E is congruent to angle G. Because they're corresponding, they should be congruent if their two shapes are congruent. Okay. H and H, well, they're congruent. And I'm going to say that they're 90 degrees here. And since one is 90, the other one should be 90. And then these two angles separately should be congruent. I could also label the sides. So EF should be congruent to FG. EH should be congruent to HG. And then since they share this side, then obviously FH is congruent to itself. Like so. Okay. Alright, so that is chapter 4, section 4, congruent triangles. If the two shapes are congruent, so if the two triangles are congruent, then their corresponding sides and their corresponding angles must be congruent as well.